Cool. All right. So this is Chris Berry, Castle Wealth Group. We do these weekly webinars every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And really, it's just like open office where any question, legal, financial, tax planning questions that get submitted, I go ahead and answer them live. And sometimes they come in as I'm talking. And so there's no slides or anything prepared. It's just really answering questions. And so first question that I have, let me share my screen so I can pull it up. Just plopped it here into this Word document. So next week, can you please discuss the advantages, disadvantages around charitable contributions via a personal check versus charitable trust versus qualified charitable distributions for people receiving RMDs? Yeah. So what we're dealing with here is looking at ways to basically cut checks to charities, get money to charities. 3 ways we can do it via personal check. Maybe set up a charitable trust. That would be more complicated, or you could do qualified charitable distributions. So 3 ways to get money to charity. So really the best option typically is going to be what's called qualified charitable distributions, QCDs. So, because what you're doing is you're taking your required minimum distribution or taking money, even if you don't have RMDs, actually, once you turn 70.5, you can do QCDs where and we've set this up for clients where they actually have a checking account on their IRA. So that money that you donate to a church or to a charity, instead of it being post-tax money, so think of it as like this, okay, you already paid the tax on the money, now it's in your name, and now you give it to the charity. You're using pre-tax dollars where the government's not getting a cut before you give it to the charity. So I'm a big fan of the qualified charitable distributions. We have a lot of our clients that are doing that. A lot of clients have checking accounts on their IRAs where they're writing it off directly from the QCD or directly from the IRA. So you're using untaxed dollars to go to a charity. Like, that's awesome. That's the best way to do it. If you're writing a check from your own personal checking account, understand that's money that you're already taxed on. So it's less efficient, like the government's getting a cut. So if you are 70.5 and you have charitable interests, I think QCDs are the best way to go. Now, getting into charitable trusts, that's a lot more complicated. And typically we're really only looking at those if we have estate tax concerns. Not to say that you can't leave stuff to charity in a trust, but we typically wouldn't set up a charitable like remainder trust unless there was estate tax issues. Now, other thing to think about with regards to gifting and charities would be what's called donor advised funds. Because right now with a standard deduction where it's at, a lot of people, depending on how much they give, they're just taking the standard deduction. All those charitable interests, unless it's getting above $25,000 roughly, then you're just taking the standard deduction. So those the charitable gifts aren't reducing your tax. So with that higher standard deduction, what you could look at doing is what's called a donor advised fund, where you open up a donor advised fund, and in 1 year you look at, okay, what's going to be my gifts I'm going to make over, say, the next 3 years or 5 years. And you make a big gift into that donor advised fund, which will now exceed that standard deduction. So now, let's say you gift $60,000 in 1 year into that donor advised fund, that's going to lower your income tax. And now instead of taking that standard deduction, you can take that gift. And then over the next 3 or 5 years, you can make the gifts from the donor advised fund to the different charities. And then you can revert back to taking your standard deduction. So whenever we have charitable interests, there are some different strategies while you're alive, as well as, God forbid, you pass away, in terms of maximizing that and minimizing what you're paying in terms of taxes. Because I'd rather money go to causes that you believe in versus going to the government, who may or may not misuse the money. So all right, so hopefully that was helpful. Again, big fan of qualified charitable distributions, QCDs, and then also I would look at donor advised funds as a potential strategy if you do have charitable interests, just as a way to minimize taxes and get more money to the charities instead of the IRS. All right, next question. Let me share my screen again. All right, if I place a funded taxable brokerage account into a castle trust, do I need to issue an affidavit of solvency? I don't even know what an affidavit of solvency is, to be honest. So the answer is no. So if you're taking post-tax money and moving it into the trust, all you do is you open it up in the trust. So if you have a brokerage account in Joe Smith's name, and you're Joe Smith, and you want to move it into the trust, now you would open up the account in the name of the Joe Smith Trust, dated March 13th. And again, the advantage of having the Castle Trust as the owner of the brokerage account is it immediately protects you from creditors and then starts that 5-year clock for Medicaid purposes, where if you can make it 5 years without needing a nursing home, then everything inside of the trust is protected. Follow up here, how many IRAs are protected from lawsuits in Michigan? From what I read, MCO, only an IRA is protected from creditors. My understanding, and again, I haven't read, like how you even quoted it. I haven't looked into it recently, but my understanding is you have $1 million, regardless of the number of IRAs, that's protected at the state level. And then you're right, your 401ks and Roths are protected at the ERISA level, because those are federal programs. So your 401ks are going to be protected federally, and then your IRAs are protected at the state level up to $1 million. Now, when we say protected, we're talking about protected from creditors, not protected from nursing home or Medicaid. If you're to need a nursing home or Medicaid, then anything inside of a 401k, anything inside of an IRA, that's going to have to be spent down. So that's a countable asset. So understand there's different types of asset protection. There's protecting from like creditors, like if you're to get sued, but then also there's protection from like nursing home care, and the programs work differently. So even though your IRAs and 401ks are creditor protected, they're not Medicaid spend down protected. And so that's why a lot of times we look at a Castle Trust as a strategy to protect those assets. All right. Next, this one just came in. Let me put it in, share my screen real quick. And here. Can you gift kids and this gift be deductible for tax returns? No, your kids unfortunately are not a charity, so or a church. It has to be to like a 501c3. That would be how you can get deductions. And I have some clients, we've set up like some 501c3s for and foundations for some clients, but no, gifting to your kids, even though it's charitable, is not tax deductible. So, all right. And that's all I have. Here's one more, just following up on the donor advised funds. Copy it. Let me share my screen. And here. Can a donor advised fund be set up from pre-tax IRA funds so as to preserve the standard deduction in all years? Can the donor? Yes. Yes. So you can use pre-tax IRA money to fund. Actually, let me think about that. So we have IRA money. That is a good question. I don't think you can, to be honest. So if we're using pre-tax IRA money, that's where we would use QCDs. I guess, to be honest, it really doesn't matter, because if you, okay, I'm sorry. It took me a second to think through it. Yeah, so you would pull the money out of the IRA. So it's not like you're doing a donor advised fund IRA. You're just pulling the money out of the IRA, and it would go into the donor advised funds, and that would be tax free. There wouldn't be any tax on that. And then over time, every couple of years, you could then distribute from the donor advised fund. So yeah, like ideally, any gifting, we want to use pre-tax dollars. And so we wouldn't set up like a donor advised fund IRA. We would set up the donor advised fund and then move the money from the IRA to the donor advised fund. Sorry about that. Just kind of brain wasn't quite working right. So, and that's one of the things with these webinars is I don't know what questions are coming in. So sometimes I got to kind of noodle through it in my head. So, but that is all I have. So with that, thank you, everyone. Make it a great week. If you do have any questions, feel free to email them over and I will get to them next week. Make it a great week.